Hello there. Welcome to Drifting Off Learning Channel. You have arrived at exactly the right moment, at exactly the right pace, and there is nothing more you need to do tonight except allow yourself to settle, very gently, into the quiet space that is already waiting for you. You don't need to hold on to anything. You don't need to remember where you left off, or what comes next, or what tomorrow might ask of you. All of that can rest now, just as you are about to rest. The day has done what days do. It has moved and filled itself and asked things of you, and now it is finished, and you are here, lying still, breathing slowly, and the world outside is dimming and quieting in the way that it always does when the hours grow soft and the light disappears. Take a breath if you feel drawn to. A slow one. There is no rush. Let your lungs fill in their own time and then release without effort, without force. Just a breath, and then another. Let your body grow heavy against whatever is beneath you. The mattress, the pillow, the warmth of your blanket, the familiar weight of your own limbs settling down after a long day of carrying you through everything that needed to be carried through. You are safe here, completely and wholly safe. The door is closed, the world is quiet, and all you have to do is drift. Tonight, we are going to wander together through something very gentle and very old. The quiet mystery of how time is felt and measured and understood in different corners of this spinning world. Not in any urgent way, not as something to study or recall, just as soft observations, like watching leaves fall from a great distance, or listening to rain that is happening somewhere slightly further away than where you are lying now. Each thought will come, and then gently leave, and you will not be asked to hold on to any of them. They are simply here to keep you company as you float downward into sleep. If tonight's narration brings you some small comfort, some small gift of rest, then perhaps you might consider returning to this channel when other nights need gentling. A quiet tap, a soft subscription whenever you feel moved to. Not because it is important, but simply as a way of finding your way back here whenever sleep seems far away. That is all. Nothing pressing, nothing urgent, just an open door. And now, very softly, let us begin. Somewhere on this planet right now, it is the deepest part of the night. Somewhere, a city is entirely still. Streetlights are glowing their amber glow over empty pavements, and the air is the particular kind of cool that only arrives long after midnight, when even the last of the evening people have gone home, and the buildings have finally begun to exhale. In that city, time feels suspended, thick, like honey that has been left in a cold place. The clocks on the walls are still moving, of course. The second hands are still sweeping their silent circles, but no one is watching them. No one is counting. In the deepest part of the night, time stops being a thing that is measured and becomes, instead, simply something that passes, and at the same moment, at this very same point in the rotation of the earth, somewhere else entirely, it is early morning. A pale, barely there morning, where the sky is not yet blue but not entirely dark either, where the birds have just begun their first tentative sounds, where someone in a small house is filling a kettle without turning on too many lights because they do not want to disturb the fragile quality of that hour, that thin and precious hour that belongs entirely to the very beginning of a new day. The world in that place is just arriving, just inhaling its first breath. The light is gray and soft, and the dew is still on everything, and time in that place feels full of possibility, without being demanding about it. Time in that place is moving forward very slowly, the way a river moves when it is very wide and very calm. It is extraordinary, if you let yourself think about it quietly, that both of these moments, the deep midnight stillness and the pale early morning, are happening at the same time, right now, on the same planet, separated only by the position of the sun and the turning of the earth. We divide the globe into 24 time zones, and in each of those zones, the human beings who live there experience the same 24 hours as everyone else, but each at their own offset, each living through their noon and their midnight at different points in what we all share as a single rotation. It means that at no moment in any day is the entire world doing the same thing. At no moment is everyone sleeping, or everyone awake, or everyone at work, or everyone at rest. The planet is always a patchwork, a mosaic of different moments, all happening at once. This was not always understood so clearly. For most of human history, each town and village kept its own time, based on the movement of the sun directly overhead. When the sun reached its highest point in the sky, its zenith, its noon, the church bells rang, the market opened, the day divided itself in two. And because the sun reaches its zenith at a slightly different moment in every location as the earth turns, the noon in one town might be 15 minutes later than the noon in a town 20 miles to the west. This was simply the way of things. No one found it strange. Time was local. Time was the sun above your particular hill, your particular valley, your particular roof. Time was something that belonged to you, and to the people around you, and to nowhere else. The railways changed this. When trains began to cross the landscapes of the world, first in Britain, then in Europe and North America and beyond, the tiny differences between local times became a practical problem. A train departing at noon from one station might arrive at its destination at a time that the clocks there had not yet reached, or had already passed, because each station kept its own local time. The scheduling of arrivals and departures became a tangle of minutes and discrepancies, and the people who ran the railways grew very tired of it. And so, gradually, the idea of standardized time was born. The idea that a region, or a country, or eventually a zone of the globe, would all agree to set their clocks to the same moment, regardless of where the sun happened to be in the sky overhead. The railways did not just carry people from place to place. They carried time itself, and made it uniform, and in doing so, they changed something very quiet and very deep in the human relationship with the hours of the day. There is something wistful about this, when you think about it gently. The loss of sun time. The loss of the idea that your noon was yours alone, calibrated precisely to where you stood on the surface of the earth. There is something that was surrendered when time became standardized, a kind of intimacy with the sky, a kind of personal calibration with the arc of the sun above your particular place in the world. But what was gained was connection, coordination, the ability to say to someone far away, "I will meet you at 3 o'clock," and both of you know, within your respective zones, that the hour will come for both of you at the same agreed-upon point. The world became larger and more connected, and time helped make the connection possible. In China, a country vast enough to naturally span 5 time zones, there is only one official time, Beijing Standard Time, and every clock in the country, from the easternmost cities by the Pacific coast to the remote western regions near the borders of Afghanistan and Tajikistan, is set to the same hour. This means that in the far west of China, noon by the clock often arrives when the sun is still climbing, still quite far from its peak. In those western regions, people sometimes eat their midday meal in what their bodies understand as late morning. They go to sleep in what the sun suggests is still the early evening. There is a gentle dissonance between clock time and sun time that shapes the rhythms of daily life in ways that are quiet and particular to that place. People simply adjust. Humans are remarkably good at adjusting. The body finds its rhythms, and the rhythms adapt, and life continues, and the sun keeps moving regardless of what the clock face says. Spain, in Europe, keeps Central European time, the same time as Germany, France, and Poland, countries which lie mostly to the east of Spain. This means that in Madrid, the sun sets later by the clock than it does in cities at similar latitudes that follow more locally calibrated time. The Spanish evening, as a result, arrives quite late by the clock. Dinner in Spain is famously an evening affair, often beginning at 9 or 10 at night when elsewhere in Europe the evening meal was hours ago. The children stay up late. The streets are alive with the sounds of conversation and movement at hours when other European cities have grown quiet. The rhythm of a Spanish day is not lazy or careless. It is simply calibrated to a clock that runs ahead of the sun, and so the whole cycle of the day shifts forward, and the evening stretches long and warm and unhurried. It is a gentle thing to consider that something as seemingly fixed as dinner time, as ordinary as when people choose to sleep, is quietly shaped by the relationship between the clock on the wall and the sun in the sky. A relationship that is different in every corner of the world, and that has been negotiated and renegotiated through history in ways that leave soft marks on daily life without anyone necessarily noticing. Iceland sits at the edge of the world, in the far north of the Atlantic, and it keeps Greenwich Mean Time, the same time as the United Kingdom, despite being positioned at longitudes that would more naturally align it with a time zone 2 hours behind. This means that in summer, when the sun barely sets, Iceland experiences the midnight sun under a clock that reads 11 or 12 at night. The sky remains bright. The birds keep singing. The light pours in under the edges of curtains that were not built to block out a sun that refuses to go down. In winter, the reverse occurs. The darkness comes early and stays long, and the clock says 3 in the afternoon, but the sky outside is the deep blue-black of what most people would call evening. Icelanders have learned to live in a particularly fluid relationship with light and clock time, to rest when their bodies ask for rest regardless of what the hour says, to move and work and eat according to a personal rhythm that has absorbed the extremes of northern latitude into something livable and even beautiful. They pull the curtains. They light the lamps. They make the interior world warm and soft and independent of the sky. In Norway and Sweden and Finland and the other countries of the far north, the same phenomenon occurs. The summer solstice in these places is a festival of light, not just because it is celebratory, but because it is genuinely remarkable. The sun traces a low, lingering arc across the sky, touching the horizon and then climbing back, never quite willing to sink below it, and the world is bathed in a golden light that goes on for hours past when dark should have fallen. People sit outside in that light and talk quietly. They swim in lakes. They walk along paths where the trees are still full of birds. They eat slowly, and they linger, and they let time stretch out in the way that time stretches when there is enough light to see by, and no urgency to stop. And then the winter comes, and the light withdraws. In the northernmost parts of Norway, in the region called Tromsø, the sun does not rise at all for nearly 2 months. Not because it has gone somewhere, but because the tilt of the Earth has positioned the Arctic Circle in a shadow that the sun cannot reach at its lowest arc. This period is called polar night. The sky is not entirely dark during polar night. There is a kind of blue twilight that arrives each midday, a soft and luminous glow that suggests the sun is close, just beyond the curve of the Earth, casting its light upward into the atmosphere before disappearing again. People in Tromsø have learned to love this light. They say it is like no other light in the world, indigo and tender and still. They go outside into it in the middle of the day and stand in it for a while, the way one might stand in the warmth of a fireplace, drawing something from it that is not quite warmth, but is something equally sustaining. The relationship between light and time and the feeling of a day is something that stretches back to the very origins of consciousness. Long before there were clocks, or calendars, or railway timetables, there was the sun. The sun moved across the sky, and everything that lived on the earth oriented itself to that movement. Animals woke and slept in its rhythm. Plants opened and closed their flowers. Tides responded not just to the moon but to the thermal expansion and contraction of water in the sun's warmth. The sun was the first clock, and it kept perfect time for billions of years before any creature developed the capacity to notice. When you lie down now and your body begins to grow heavy, there is something in you that is as old as this, an ancient instruction encoded in every cell that says, when the light is gone and the world is dark, the body should rest. This instruction is carried by a tiny structure in the center of your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of cells no larger than a grain of rice, sitting just above the point where the optic nerves cross. And it coordinates the release of melatonin, the hormone of darkness, the quiet signal that tells every organ in your body that night has arrived, and rest is appropriate, and sleep can begin. This process has been happening every night of your life. It happened last night, and the night before, and it is happening right now. Your body is already doing it. You don't need to try. You simply need to allow it. In Japan, the culture of time has developed along its own particular lines, shaped by geography and history, and a set of values that have made the Japanese relationship with promptness and precision something quite distinct from most other places in the world. Japanese trains are famously punctual, not just on time, but precisely on time to the minute, sometimes to the second. When a train is delayed by 5 minutes, an announcement is made and an apology is offered, because a 5-minute delay is understood as a genuine deviation from the expected order of things. The culture of punctuality extends into daily life, into meetings and appointments and social engagements, into a sense that time is a shared resource that must be respected and not wasted, that arriving late imposes a cost on others that is worth taking seriously. And yet, within this precision, there is also a different relationship with time, a philosophical one, expressed in concepts that have no easy translation into other languages. The word ma in Japanese refers to a pause, an interval, a negative space between events or moments, but not an empty space. Ma is a pregnant pause. Ma is the silence between musical notes that gives the notes their meaning. Ma is the gap in a conversation that is full of thought, even though no words are being spoken. In Japanese aesthetics and in Japanese life, Ma is not wasted time. It is time that is allowed to breathe, time that exists for its own sake, not as a container for productivity or activity, but as a presence in itself. The Japanese tea ceremony is built around MA, around the careful, unhurried intervals between each gesture, each pouring, each placement of the cup. And these intervals are not dead time, but alive time, resonant with attention and awareness. This is a concept that the busy, efficiency-driven corners of the modern world often struggle with. The idea that the time between things is not time lost, but time that has its own value. That a pause is not a failure to act, but a form of being. That the space around the notes is as essential as the notes themselves. Lying here now, in the quiet of your room, in the interval between the end of the day and the beginning of sleep, perhaps you can feel something like Ma. The space you are in right now, the pause before the long rest, which is not empty at all, but soft and full and necessary. In India, the official time zone is called Indian Standard Time, and it is offset from Greenwich Mean Time by 5.5 hours. Note the half hour, which makes it unusual, one of a small number of time zones in the world that are offset by a fraction of an hour rather than a full hour. This half-hour offset means that the midday of Indian Standard Time sits quite comfortably between the noons of the two surrounding full-hour zones, aligning well with the actual solar noon across much of the subcontinent. Nepal goes further. Nepal Standard Time is offset by 5 hours and 45 minutes, a 15-minute fraction that makes it the most offset standard time in the world from any neighboring zone. A quiet and precise calibration to the particular geography of the Himalayas. These fractional time zones are small reminders that the 24-hour division of the world is a human invention, and, like all human inventions, it has been adapted and adjusted and tweaked to fit the enormously varied circumstances of the places and people it serves. India is also a country where the informal sense of time is deeply different from the formal one. The concept of Indian Standard Time is sometimes used informally to refer to a more relaxed approach to punctuality. The understanding that arrival times are approximate, that a gathering will begin when enough people have gathered, that the flow of social life need not be tightly synchronized with the clock. This is not carelessness. It is a different philosophy, one that places human connection and natural flow above the mechanical precision of the schedule. A gathering in a traditional Indian household does not start at 7 because the invitation said 7. It starts when it starts, which may be 7 or maybe 8, and the time in between is not wasted, but filled with the gradual arrival of people and the accumulation of greetings and the slow warming of the room. Time, in this frame, is not a container with fixed edges, but a medium that expands and contracts according to what it is being asked to hold. Australia is another place where time plays some fascinating and quiet tricks. The continent spans 3 main time zones, Eastern, Central, and Western. And the Central Zone, Australian Central Standard Time, is offset by 9.5 hours from Greenwich Mean Time, making it another of the world's fractional time zones. The states of New South Wales and Victoria and Queensland are in the east, and Western Australia with its vast red emptiness is in the west, and the two edges of the continent are separated by 2.5 hours of clock time. When it is noon in Sydney, it is still morning in Perth, a fact that anyone who has tried to schedule a phone call across the continent understands with quiet frustration. And during the summer months, some Australian states observe daylight saving time while others do not, creating a shifting patchwork of offsets that can, in the middle of an Australian summer, mean that the East Coast is running 3.5 hours ahead of the West. Daylight saving time itself is a fascinating intervention. the twice-yearly adjustment of clocks by a single hour, the springing forward and the falling back, a practice observed by roughly 40% of the world's countries. The idea was proposed in various forms in the 19th century. Benjamin Franklin made an early, somewhat humorous reference to it in a letter suggesting that Parisians could save on candles by waking earlier in summer. But it was not formally adopted until the early 20th century, driven first by the energy conservation demands of the First World War. The theory was simple. By shifting the clocks forward in summer, people would wake an hour earlier by the sun, and therefore need an hour less of artificial lighting in the evening, saving fuel and energy. Whether it actually achieves this saving in the modern world has been the subject of much quiet debate among researchers. What it indisputably achieves is a twice-yearly disruption of the human circadian rhythm, a gentle jolt to the body's internal clock, a reminder that the hours we keep are not entirely natural, but have been arranged by the agreements of societies and governments and the changing demands of different historical moments. There are studies that suggest that the transition into daylight saving time in spring, the night when 1 hour is lost, when the clocks jump forward and everyone's sleep is shortened by 60 minutes, has measurable effects on health and mood, and even traffic accident rates in the days immediately following. The body does not want to lose an hour. The body has been calibrated by weeks and months of one particular schedule, and it adjusts grudgingly and slowly to the new one. Some people feel the change for a week, others for 2 or 3. There is a kind of time lag in the body, a ghost of the old schedule that lingers in the cells and the hormones long after the clocks have made their adjustment. Scientists call this social jet lag, the dissonance between the clock a society keeps and the clock the body wants to keep. And it is a very real and quietly consequential part of modern life in the places that observe it. Jet lag itself is one of the most vivid ways in which the human body demonstrates its attachment to a particular time. When you travel rapidly across time zones, as passengers in an aircraft, crossing in a few hours what would once have taken weeks by ship, the body does not update instantly. It cannot. The suprachiasmatic nucleus and all its downstream effects, the sleep hormones, the digestion, the body temperature, the heart rate, continue to follow the rhythm of the place you departed from, even as the place you have arrived in is operating on a different clock entirely. You might land in Tokyo from London and find that your body insists it is the middle of the night even as the city outside your hotel window is bright and busy with midday. Or you might arrive in New York from Paris and feel a profound desire for sleep at 4 in the afternoon, your body still faithfully following the time of the place you left behind. The body updates eventually. At a rate of roughly 1 time zone per day, the internal clock drifts gradually toward alignment with the external one. You go to bed a little later each night. You wake a little later each morning. The hunger shifts. The alertness shifts. After a week or 10 days, depending on how far you have traveled and in which direction, you are synchronized again. And the old time feels like a distant dream, a schedule that belonged to a different version of yourself who lived briefly on the other side of the world. There is something deeply tender about the body's loyalty to its time, the way it keeps faithfully to the rhythm of home, even when home is 10,000 miles away. The way your hunger still arrives in the night at the hour when dinner would have been served in the city you left. The way your sleep insists on coming at odd hours, carrying the time zone of your origin like a letter from home delivered to the wrong address. It is one of the many ways the body speaks in a language older than words, a language of rhythm and chemistry and subtle sensation. a language that connects you to every other living thing that has ever oriented itself to the movement of the sun. The Polynesian peoples of the Pacific Ocean were, for thousands of years, the greatest navigators the world has ever known. They crossed vast stretches of open water in double-hulled canoes. Canoes built from wood and fiber and the knowledge of generations. Navigating by the stars, by the currents, by the feel of the swell beneath the hull, by the behavior of birds and fish and clouds, and by an internal sense of position and direction that modern researchers are still attempting to fully understand. They settled the islands of the Pacific, from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the south to Easter Island in the east. And they did so without compasses, without maps as we understand them, without instruments. They read the world directly. They read time through the sky, through the seasons, through the patterns of stars that rose and set at predictable points on the horizon. For these navigators, time was not an abstraction. It was not a number on a clock face. It was the position of the Pleiades above the horizon, the temperature of the current beneath the hull, the angle at which the Southern Cross was tilting. Time was something you read from the world around you, something you inhabited with your whole body and your whole attention, something that was inseparable from place. You knew what time it was because you knew where you were, and where the stars were, and what the sea was doing. Time and space were woven together into a single fabric of awareness. This is very different from the way most modern people experience time, as something that happens on a screen, or on a watch, or in a calendar notification, something external and digital and separate from the body's experience. But the body still knows. Deep beneath the layers of digital scheduling and artificial light, the body still reads the angle of the sun, still notes the cooling of the air, still feels the shift in light that comes an hour before dark, and still prepares, in its own quiet chemistry, for rest. You may not feel it most of the time, because there is so much noise between you and it. But tonight, in the dark, with the phone face down and the light out and the world quieted, you can feel it if you let yourself. The body knows it is time. The body is already beginning. In the Islamic tradition, time has historically been organized around the 5 daily prayers: the Fajr before sunrise, the Dhuhr at midday, the Asr in the afternoon, the Maghrib at sunset, and the Isha in the evening. These prayer times are not fixed to a clock in the way that a 9-to-5 workday is fixed. They move with the sun. In summer, when the sun rises early and sets late, the day stretches out between the prayers and the intervals are long. In winter, when the sun is brief and low, the prayers come closer together, compressing the day into a shorter arc. A person living in a place that follows these rhythms finds that their day is not divided by the clock, but by the quality of light, by the moment when the sky first lightens, by the moment of highest brightness, by the lengthening of the afternoon, by the color of the sunset, by the descent of the dark. Time, in this framework, is intimately connected to the natural world, and the religious practice is itself a form of attentiveness to the movement of the sun and the turning of the day. In the Jewish tradition, a new day begins not at midnight, as the modern secular calendar has it, but at sundown. The Sabbath, the day of rest, begins on Friday evening when 3 stars are visible in the sky, and ends on Saturday night when 3 stars appear again. This means that the Jewish day has a different emotional shape from the secular day. It begins in the evening, in the quiet, in the time of rest and dinner and conversation, and the lighting of candles, and it moves through the night and the following day before concluding the next evening. The day is born in softness. The day ends in softness. The most sacred time is bounded on both sides by the falling dark. There is something in this that feels ancient and right. The understanding that the meaningful unit of time is not the clock midnight but the sunset. Not the artificial division but the natural one. The moment when the sky changes color and the world prepares for its nightly rest. Many indigenous calendars and time systems around the world are organized similarly, not by the mechanical division of hours and minutes, but by the movement of the sun, the moon, the seasons, the migrations of animals and birds, the blooming of particular plants. The Lakota people of the North American plains kept a winter count, a pictographic calendar painted on animal hide, with each year represented by a single memorable event that defined that year in the community's memory. There was no entry for each month, no subdivision of the year into weeks and days. Simply the year, named for what happened in it. The winter of the meteor shower. The year the spotted horses came. The winter the river froze over entirely. Time was kept not as a grid of equal intervals, but as a narrative. A story of things that happened, each year as unique as the events that filled it. This is so different from our current experience of time, where years are numbered rather than named, where days are largely interchangeable, where a Tuesday in February feels much the same as a Tuesday in October, at least in terms of the formal structure that organizes it. The modern calendar smooths time into an undifferentiated sequence of equal units. The winter count made each year singular, memorable, irreplaceable. Perhaps there is something to be learned from this, quietly, in the sleepy understanding that comes when the day is over and the mind is releasing its grip on the schedule and the to-do list. The day that has just passed was not an interchangeable unit. It was specific. It had its own texture, its own quality, its own small moments of weather and conversation and light. It will not come again. The Balinese calendar is one of the most complex and beautiful in the world. A system of interlocking cycles that creates a relationship with time that is deeply different from the linear one most of us inhabit. In Bali, there are multiple simultaneous calendar systems running at once, a 7-day week, a 5-day week, and several shorter cycles, all turning together like interlocking gears, creating a rich patchwork of overlapping time names. Each day has a combination of names from all these simultaneous cycles, and the particular combination determines the quality and meaning of that day. Which activities are auspicious, which ceremonies should be held, which tasks are best left for another time. The Balinese relationship with time is not linear but cyclical, not a road moving forward to a destination, but a wheel turning through patterns that repeat and recombine. The future is not something out there ahead of you that you are moving toward. The future is a familiar landscape you will cycle through again. There is something restful in a cyclical understanding of time. The idea that the patterns come around, that what has passed is not gone, but will return in some form, in some quality, in some echo of itself. That winter is not a loss but a phase, and that spring is not a surprise but a fulfillment of a cycle that was always going to come. That sleep is not an interruption of life, but a part of its rhythm. The necessary downstroke of the cycle, the valley between the peaks of wakefulness, without which the peaks themselves would not be possible. The day needs the night to be a day. The waking needs the sleeping to be waking. You are not failing to be awake right now. You are completing the cycle. You are doing exactly what the day requires. In Bhutan, the tiny Himalayan kingdom known for its philosophy of gross national happiness, time is experienced in a way that reflects the country's broader relationship with pace and priority. Bhutan was one of the last countries in the world to allow television, only opening to it in 1999, and the country has been careful and deliberate about the speed and manner of its development, prioritizing well-being and environmental health over economic growth and modernization. The pace of life in many parts of Bhutan reflects this. Slower, more rooted in agricultural and spiritual rhythms, more attentive to the seasons and the community than to the clock and the career. Mornings in Bhutan often begin before dawn, not because of a schedule, but because the light changes and the world calls for movement. Evenings end early because there is no particular reason to extend them. The hours between are filled with what needs to be filled: farming, cooking, praying, talking, and when there is nothing that needs to be filled, they are left open. Rest is not something earned or scheduled. It is something taken when the body asks for it, which is a wisdom that most of the modern world has largely unlearned. In the Amazon rainforest, the Pirahã people of Brazil speak a language that linguists find remarkable for many reasons, one of which is its apparent lack of tense in the way that most languages encode tense. The Pirahã language, as described by researchers, seems oriented toward the immediately observable and experiential present in a way that makes extended narratives about the distant past or the far future less natural than in most human languages. This does not mean the Pirahã have no memory or no plans. It means their language organizes experience around what can be perceived, what is immediate, what is here. There is a quality to this orientation that is, in its own way, a form of radical presence. The attention given fully to what is happening now, in this moment, in this place. Not dragged back into the past or projected forward into the future, but here, now, in the dense, living, noisy, fragrant, living present of the rainforest. The rainforest itself has a different relationship with time than almost any other place on Earth. The Amazon is ancient. The river itself is perhaps 11 million years old. The forest that surrounds it has been evolving and diversifying for a staggering length of time. In the deep interior of the forest, where the canopy is so thick that almost no direct sunlight reaches the ground, the sense of time is strange and soft. There are no shadows to tell you the hour. There is no horizon to show you where the sun is. There is only the diffuse green light that filters through the leaves above, the sounds of birds and insects, the drip of water from leaves that collected rain the night before, the movement of unseen creatures through the undergrowth. Time in the deep forest feels both very old and very present, the weight of millions of years of life pressing gently on the air, and the specific unrepeatability of this exact moment pressing gently on your attention. The redwood forests of Northern California have a similar quality, though the silence is deeper and the scale even more overwhelming. The coastal redwoods are among the tallest living things on Earth, some standing more than 100 meters tall, their bark as thick as a mattress, their wood the color of dried blood, their canopy so high above that the ground lives in a permanent, beautiful twilight. Some of these trees were alive when Rome was an empire. Some of them were already old when the Magna Carta was signed. They have been slowly growing for 2,000 years, adding rings one by one, each ring a year of rain and drought and fire and calm, each ring a record of a particular chapter in the history of the climate and the land. When you stand at the base of one of these trees and look up, you are looking at 2,000 years of time expressed in wood. It is humbling in the way that very few things are genuinely humbling, a reminder of how thin and brief the individual human life is against the larger rhythms of the world. And yet those rhythms are made of the same substance as our briefness. The tree grew one day at a time, one season at a time. The river found its path one rain at a time. The mountain was built one grain of sediment at a time, one volcanic upwelling at a time, over durations so vast that the human mind can gesture at them without ever quite grasping them. Deep time, the geological time that scientists talk about, the billions of years of the Earth's history, the hundreds of millions of years of the evolutionary story of life. Deep time is the context in which every single moment of your life exists. Every breath you take, every blink of your eye, every slow drift toward sleep is happening inside a universe that is 13.8 billion years old, on a planet 4.5 billion years old, in a species that has been recognizably itself for perhaps 300,000 years. Compared to these durations, the length of a human life is so brief as to be nearly unimaginable. And yet it is exactly long enough to contain everything that matters: love and learning, and rest, and the particular quality of this night, this room, this softness, this slow dissolving into sleep. The oldest human artifacts we have discovered, stone tools from roughly 3 million years ago, made by the ancestors of our genus, tell us something quiet about time. They were made by hands, shaped by intelligence and intention, carried from place to place, used for purposes we can only guess at, and then lost, buried, covered by soil and ash, and the slow accumulation of everything that came after. For 3 million years they lay in the dark of the earth, while the world above them changed beyond all recognition. Ice ages came and went. Mountains rose and eroded. Rivers changed course. Continents shifted by centimeters per year in their slow, inexorable drift. And then a person with a trowel and a brush found them and lifted them into a laboratory where instruments measured the quantum decay of radioactive atoms in the stone and calculated the age within a margin of a few thousand years. The tools were 3 million years old. They had been waiting in the dark for 3 million years. The patience of the earth is the deepest patience there is. Everything on the surface, every city, every field, every road, every river channel, every mountain and valley, is arranged by time, shaped by time. The limestone hills of southern England are made of the compressed bodies of marine creatures that lived and died in a shallow tropical sea that covered that region 400 million years ago. The red sandstone cliffs of Utah are the fossilized dunes of an enormous desert that dominated North America 250 million years ago. The black sand beaches of Iceland are made of volcanic rock that cooled from lava only hundreds or thousands of years ago, which in geological terms is the day before yesterday. The Earth is always both very old and very young, depending on which layer you are looking at, which mineral you are holding, which landscape you are standing in. And all of this, all of the deep time and the geological patience and the slow turning of continents, all of it is happening right now. Beneath your bed, beneath the floor, beneath the foundations of whatever building you are in, the earth is moving. Not fast enough to feel, not in a single night, not in a single lifetime. But the tectonic plates are moving. The mantle below is flowing very slowly in enormous convective currents of partially molten rock. The mountains that took 50 million years to build are still rising, by millimeters per year, pressed upward by the collision of plates. The seafloors are spreading, cracking open along mid-ocean ridges and filling with new rock as the plates diverge. The world is not still. It has never been still. It is simply still enough for us to stand on without noticing the movement. Still enough for us to build our houses and plant our gardens and lie down in our beds and breathe slowly in the dark. The tides that run around the world are also running right now, even as you lie here. The gravitational pull of the moon, that great, cold, ancient rock that has been orbiting the Earth for 4.5 billion years, is pulling on the oceans, raising them toward it on the near side and on the far side, creating the bulge of water that travels around the globe in a ceaseless circuit as the Earth rotates beneath it. The high tide in one bay was low tide 6 hours ago and will be low tide again in 6 more hours. The tide tables that fishermen and sailors consult are simply mathematical descriptions of the moon's position relative to the ocean at any given moment. The same patterns repeating and repeating across the years with the gentle precision of orbital mechanics. The tide has been doing this for billions of years. Long before there was anyone to notice it, the tide was moving in and out against the shores of a world that was still being arranged into the configuration we now inhabit. There is something deeply reassuring about this. The idea of the tide moving regardless, the earth turning regardless, the stars burning regardless, the seasons cycling regardless. The world has its own enormous momentum, its own deep rhythms, and they do not require anything from you. They do not ask you to stay awake or pay attention or keep track. They simply continue. The sun will rise tomorrow whether you sleep well tonight or not. The tide will come in. The birds will begin. The light will return. These are not things you have to manage or maintain. They are simply what the world does, and they will be doing it long after any particular night has passed into the past. Long after any particular worry has dissolved in the face of the larger patience of things. In Mongolia, the vast and sparsely populated landscape of the steppe creates a relationship with time that is shaped by the enormous scale of the land and the sky. Mongolia has one of the lowest population densities in the world, roughly 2 people per square kilometer in a country the size of Western Europe. In the countryside, you can stand on flat ground and see the horizon in every direction, and between you and that horizon, there may be nothing built by human hands, only grass and sky and the occasional ger, the round felt tent of the nomadic herders, sitting quietly in the middle of a vastness that extends in all directions without edge or boundary. Time in this landscape is slow and wide. The seasons are enormous here. The winters brutal and deep, the summers bright and brief, the spring a sudden explosion of green and flowers after months of white and gray. A herder on the Mongolian steppe marks time by the movement of animals, by the quality of the grass, by the behavior of the sky. It is a different calendar, written in a different language, but no less precise for that. The Mongolian nomads follow their herds across the steppe in cycles that are thousands of years old, moving to lower ground in winter and higher pastures in summer, calibrating their movements to the seasonal availability of grass and water. The animals they keep, horses, camels, cattle, sheep, goats, know the route. The horses that have spent a winter in the southern valleys know, in early spring, that the north is waiting, and they press in that direction without being told. The animals carry a kind of time in their bodies, a rhythm of season and migration that is so deeply embedded that it functions like an internal compass, pointing always toward the next necessary place. The herders follow, and, in following, they participate in a cycle so much older than themselves that it requires no explanation and no documentation. It simply is. In the mountains of Peru, the Quechua-speaking peoples who are the inheritors of the Incan tradition have a word for time that arranges the past and the future in a way that is unusual from the perspective of most Western languages. In Quechua, the past is in front. It is what you can see, the known territory, the events that have already happened and are therefore visible in memory. The future is behind. It is what you cannot see, what is coming from behind you, unknowable and unobserved. You walk backward into the future, looking always at what you know rather than straining toward what you don't. This is not just a metaphor. The Quechua spatial language of time genuinely orients the past as forward and the future as behind. The word for tomorrow points backward. The word for yesterday points forward. When you hear this, if you let yourself sit with it for a moment in the half-sleep that is beginning to gather around your thoughts, there is something in it that is unexpectedly comforting. The future behind you, not a wall you are running toward, not a destination you are straining to reach, but something that is simply coming, arriving at its own pace, finding you as you attend to what is already known. You do not have to face the future. It will come to you. You can turn your attention to what you know, to the familiar, to the already lived, to the rich and particular landscape of a life that has already happened, and let tomorrow come from behind you, arriving in its own time as it always has. In the Hawaiian language, the word for time is manawa, which also means heart and feelings, a word that links time to emotion, to the inner experience of being alive, to the felt sense of a moment rather than its measured duration. This is a beautiful conflation, because it acknowledges something that most clock systems obscure: that time is not simply an objective measure of duration, but a subjective experience that is deeply shaped by how you feel. A happy hour is short, a fearful hour is long. A boring afternoon is endless. A morning of absorption in something beloved passes like water through open hands. The felt duration of time is governed not by the sweep of the second hand, but by the quality of attention and emotion that you bring to each moment, or the quality of attention and emotion that the moment brings to you. Scientists who study the psychology of time perception have documented this in many ways. When people are asked to estimate how long they waited in a queue, those who were bored consistently overestimate the duration, while those who were distracted by conversation consistently underestimate it. When people are asked to recall a period of their lives that was filled with many novel experiences, they tend to remember it as longer than a comparable period that was routine and uneventful. The brain creates its memory of duration partly from the number of new events stored during a period. More novelty means more neural processing, more encoding, more storage, and when you look back at that period in memory, the density of stored material makes it feel long. A week of travel in an unfamiliar country can feel longer in memory than a month of ordinary routine at home. This is why childhood summers feel so long in retrospect, because everything was new. Everything was being stored and processed and encoded for the first time, and the memory of that summer is rich with distinct moments. And why recent years can feel as if they passed so quickly. because routine reduces novelty, and reduced novelty means less encoding, and less encoding means a thinner, briefer memory. But right now, the question of duration is not relevant. Right now, there is only the present moment, which is neither long nor short, but simply here. The breath you are taking, the weight of the blanket, the temperature of the pillow, the quiet of the room. These things are not asking to be measured. They are simply present, as you are simply present, and in a little while they will be accompanied by sleep, and you will stop even noticing them. In France, particularly in the culture of the French countryside, there is a kind of time that the French call l'heure bleue, the blue hour. It is the time just after sunset, before full dark, when the sky turns a particular shade of deep and luminous blue, a color with no quite exact equivalent anywhere else in the day. The sun has set, but the sky is still illuminated by its refracted glow on the underside of the atmosphere, and the light this creates is soft and cool and very still. In cities, the blue hour is when the first streetlights come on, adding warm yellow to the blue sky, creating a palette of color that painters have tried to capture for centuries. In the countryside, it is when the birds go quiet and the bats begin to come out, and the air begins its nightly descent into coolness. L'heure bleue is a transitional time, a threshold between day and night, between activity and rest, between the world of the visible and the world of the dark. It is a time that has its own character, its own emotional quality, that does not belong entirely to the day that has just ended or the night that is about to begin. Many cultures have names for this threshold time. In Arabic, the word Maghrib, which names one of the 5 daily prayer times, refers to this exact period, the moment of sunset, and the brief period that follows it, when the red has left the sky and the first stars are just becoming visible. In German, there is Zwielicht, twilight, literally too light, the in-between time when the light is neither day nor night, but a mixture of both. In Norse mythology, this was a liminal time, a time when the boundary between the human world and the spirit world was thought to be thinner than usual, when things that moved at the edges of perception might be more than shadows. These are ancient recognitions of what the modern sleep researcher would call the onset of the circadian evening, the period when melatonin begins to rise, when the body starts its gradual withdrawal from the day, when the brain begins the long preparation for the sleep that will come. You are past the blue hour now. The blue hour has been and gone, and the full dark is here, and your body is well into its preparation for sleep, and you are lying still, which is exactly what this moment asks of you. In the Swiss Alps, the towns that hang on steep slopes above the valley floors experience the sun's passage differently from the towns at the bottom of the valley. The high town sees the sun first. The morning light catches the upper slopes before it reaches the valley floor, and the high village wakes into brightness while the village below is still in shadow. In winter, when the sun is low, and the ridges of the Alps throw their enormous shadows across the terrain, the valley floors can spend entire days without seeing direct sunlight. The sun may rise above the far ridge and set behind the near ridge without the valley floor ever falling in its direct path. The people in these valley communities developed a culture that placed great value on the times when sunlight did reach them, which were brief and precious. The sun terraces, the south-facing terraces built into mountain communities for catching the low winter sun, are not just decorative. They were, historically, essential. A place to warm the bones after weeks of shadow. a place to feel, briefly, that the sun had not forgotten you. In the polar regions, the relationship with the sun is taken to its extreme. In Antarctica, the research stations maintained by various countries are among the most isolated places on Earth, and the people who winter there, the small crews who stay through the Antarctic winter when no aircraft can land and no ship can reach the continent, experience the most extreme version of polar night anywhere on the globe. For 4 months, the sun does not appear above the horizon. Not once. The light that exists during this period is the reflected light of the moon, the light of the stars, and the extraordinary light of the aurora australis, the southern aurora, which dances in the sky in colors of green and violet and pink and white, the result of solar wind particles colliding with the Earth's magnetic field and exciting the molecules of the upper atmosphere into luminescence. People who winter in Antarctica report that the experience of time is profoundly altered by the loss of the sun. Without the daily solar cycle to anchor the body's clock, sleep patterns can drift and fragment. Melatonin secretion becomes irregular. The sense of how long the day is, of what hour it is, of whether one should be sleeping or awake, becomes fuzzy and uncertain. The body is looking for its anchor and cannot find it. This is not unique to Antarctica. Any long windowless space, an office with no natural light, a hospital ward where the lights remain constant day and night, can create a similar disorientation, a drift in the body's sense of time, a gradual uncoupling of the internal clock from the rhythms of the world outside. This is why sleep researchers and designers of healthy environments are increasingly attentive to the importance of natural light, not just for visibility, but for the calibration of the body's clock. A window is not just a view. A window is a clock. It tells the body, continuously and without words, what time it is. It tells the body when to be alert and when to begin the slow preparation for rest. You, tonight, in the dark of your room, are giving your body the signal it needs. The dark is the signal. The dark says, "Rest now," and the body responds. The concept of the circadian rhythm, from the Latin circa diem, meaning about a day, is one of the foundational discoveries of modern biology. Nearly all living things on Earth have a biological clock, a molecular mechanism that oscillates with a period of roughly 24 hours, and that allows the organism to anticipate the regular changes in its environment. The light and dark cycle, the temperature cycle, the availability of food at different hours. The mechanism is extraordinarily ancient. The genetic components of the circadian clock have been found in organisms as simple as cyanobacteria, single-celled creatures that have been on Earth for over 3 billion years. The same basic molecular gears that run your body's internal clock were running, in some form, in the first photosynthetic organisms that evolved to track the rhythm of the sun billions of years before the oceans had any more complex life in them. When you think about this very quietly, in the dark, there is something humbling and comforting in it. Your body's clock is 3 billion years old. The capacity to sense the rhythm of the day is among the most ancient biological endowments your species carries. Older than bones, older than blood, older than the first fish that dragged itself onto land. It is part of you in a way that is so deep and so fundamental that it runs completely without your conscious intervention, ticking away in every cell of your body, coordinating the complex symphony of chemistry and metabolism that sustains you, reminding you, even without any external cue, that day follows night and night follows day, and that there is always a time for rest. The ancient Greeks and Romans told time with devices called clepsydrae, water clocks, which measured the passage of time by the regulated flow of water from one container to another. The water fell at a steady rate through a small hole, and the level in the receiving vessel indicated the hour. The clepsydra was used in courts of law to allocate speaking time. Each party was given a measured amount of water, and when the water ran out, the speaking stopped. There is something in this that feels very different from our digital clocks, the idea of time as a substance, something that flows, something with weight and volume, something you can pour from one vessel to another and watch as it empties. The clepsydra made time visible, audible almost. You could hear the water dripping, a steady, soft, metronomic sound, and in that sound was the passing of the minutes. The sundial is older still. The gnomon, the stick or blade whose shadow tells the hour, may be the oldest timekeeping device in human history, predating even written records of its use. Ancient Egyptian obelisks served as enormous sundials, casting their shadows over calibrated marks in the sand of temple courtyards. The shadow moved imperceptibly, invisibly, and yet over the course of an hour the change was clear. There was something honest about the sundial that the mechanical clock and the digital clock have made harder to feel. The directness of the connection between the device and the sun. The sundial has no mechanism. It has no gears, no springs, no battery, no processor. It works because of the sun, nothing else. It is a pure expression of the relationship between a place on earth and the star that warms it. And when the sun goes down, the sundial stops. This has always been both its limitation and its most truthful quality. The sundial cannot lie about nighttime. The sundial cannot pretend that the night is the same as the day. When the sun sets, the shadow disappears, and time, for the sundial, simply stops, and the world is left to its own dark rhythm. The rhythm of stars and cooling air, and the slow deepening of silence that comes when the light is gone. In Greenland, the enormous island that sits between the Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean, the culture of the Greenlandic Inuit developed over thousands of years in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The winters here are long and dark and profoundly cold. The summers are brief and brilliant. For the Inuit, the measure of time was not the clock but the season, and the season was understood not just as a temperature and a light level, but as a whole particular world of activities, foods, sounds, and relationships. The breathing season, when the sea ice broke up and the animals became available. The hunting season, when the long summer days allowed extended journeys across the land. The dark season, when the family gathered inside and the stories were told. The great oral literature of the Inuit, passed from generation to generation in the long winter nights by the light of the oil lamp. The stories that contained the knowledge of the world. These stories were not entertainment in the modern sense. They were knowledge. They contained instructions for surviving in a particular landscape at a particular time of year. They contained the wisdom of people who had learned, over generations, how to live in a world that most of humanity would find unlivable. The stories kept time in a different way, not by recording dates, but by preserving patterns, cycles, the accumulated wisdom of countless winters and summers compressed into narrative, into the characters and events of stories that felt fictional but functioned as maps. The map of When the Ice Breaks, disguised as a story about a hunter. The map of Where the Fish Run, embedded in the speech of an animal character. Time, in the oral tradition, is not chronological. It is layered. It is the past speaking to the present through the voices of the storytellers. In Kiribati, the small island nation in the Central Pacific whose territory straddles the international date line, the question of what day it is has been a matter of genuine complexity and, at times, political decision. The international date line is the imaginary line on the surface of the Earth where the calendar changes by one day. To the west of the line, the date is one day ahead of the date to the east. When Kiribati's eastern islands lie on the east side of the line, and the western islands lie on the west side, the nation spans two different calendar days simultaneously. In 1995, Kiribati moved the date line eastward around its entire territory, so that all of its islands would share the same calendar date. The practical result is that Kiribati is among the first places on Earth to experience each new day and each new year. The eastern islands of Kiribati are so far east that when midnight arrives there, it is still the previous day almost everywhere else in the world, except for a few uninhabited islands. This means that Kiribati Islanders technically greet each new year before almost anyone else on the planet. The celebrations beginning in the small hours of what is, elsewhere, still yesterday. It is a charming quirk of the human arrangement of the world that the first sunrise of a new year is not the first sunrise in any astronomical sense, but simply the first sunrise on a particular side of a line that humans drew on a map to prevent the calendar from becoming tangled. The sun does not know about the international date line. The sun is equally indifferent to Monday and Thursday, to the 1st of January and the 31st of December, to the old year and the new. The sun simply rises, as it has risen every morning since the Earth was 4.5 billion years old, and will continue to rise long after the human systems of timekeeping have been replaced by whatever comes next. There is a stone in Ireland called the Newgrange Passage Tomb, a Neolithic monument built more than 5,000 years ago by people whose names we do not know, whose language we cannot reconstruct, whose beliefs and daily lives are largely opaque to us. The monument consists of a large mound of earth and stone, inside which a narrow passage leads to a central chamber. Once a year, on the morning of the winter solstice, the shortest day, the longest night, the turning point of the year, the rising sun aligns perfectly with the passage, and a beam of light penetrates the length of the corridor and floods the central chamber with golden light. This continues for approximately 17 minutes. For the other 364 days of the year, the chamber is dark. But on this one morning, it is lit. The people who built Newgrange knew the sky. They understood the winter solstice well enough to build a monument that would celebrate it with precision for thousands of years. They did not have instruments. They did not have mathematics in the form we would recognize. They had observation, careful, patient, multi-generational observation of the sky, the sharing of what they had seen, and the ingenuity to translate that knowledge into stone in a way that would outlast not just their own lives, but every civilization that came between them and us. Newgrange is 5,000 years old, and it still works. On the morning of the winter solstice, every year, the light still enters the chamber. The people who built it have been gone for millennia, but their knowledge of the sky is still accurate. The sun is still where they calculated it would be. This is the deepest form of timekeeping. Not the clock on the wall or the calendar on the screen, but the alignment of stone and sun. The commitment of accumulated observation into permanent form. The trust that the patterns of the sky are reliable enough to build upon. The people of Newgrange were right to trust. The sun has not moved. The solstice has not drifted. 5,000 years of winters and summers have passed over that hill in Ireland, and the light still comes in on the same morning at the same angle through the same narrow passage, just as it was designed to do. The faithfulness of the sky is a kind of constancy that the human world has rarely achieved. When the nights are very clear and very dark, far from the glow of cities, the stars are a kind of clock, a very old clock. The star you see rising in the east tonight is the same star that was rising in the east on this same night a year ago. The constellations that follow the arc of the ecliptic, the path of the sun and moon and planets through the sky, are the same constellations that ancient Mesopotamian astronomers catalogued 4,000 years ago. The same patterns that Polynesian navigators used to steer their canoes across the Pacific. The same patterns that shepherds and farmers and sailors have watched rise and set over millennia uncounted. The stars are the slowest clock and the most patient, and in their rising and setting they carry a sense of time that makes the human scale of measurement, the years, the decades, the centuries, feel very small and very local. The light you see when you look at a star is old. The nearest star to our sun, Proxima Centauri, is about 4 light years away, which means the light leaving it tonight will take 4 years to reach the Earth. The light you can see from it right now left it 4 years ago. You are looking 4 years into the past. The Andromeda Galaxy, visible on a very clear night from the northern hemisphere as a faint smudge of light, is 2.5 million light-years away. The light you can detect from it tonight has been traveling for 2.5 million years. It left Andromeda before our species existed, before our genus existed, when the most human-like creatures on Earth were small, hominid, stone tool users whose descendants would not become recognizably Homo sapiens for another 2 million years. The sky is full of this ancient light, and when you look at it, you are looking not at the universe as it is, but at the universe as it was, at many different depths of the past simultaneously, a layered archive of light from all the different eras of cosmic history. This is almost too large to hold. It is certainly too large to worry about, and so it need not be held or worried about or processed in any particular way. It can simply be felt from a very great distance, the way you might feel the depth of the ocean from the surface, not by going down into it, but by sensing its presence beneath you, its scale and its patience, its complete and undemanding depth. You are on the surface. You are floating gently in the dark. The depths are there, and they are not asking anything of you. They are simply there. In West Africa, in many cultures, the relationship with time is organized around the concept of event time, rather than clock time. An event begins when it begins, when the people have gathered, when the preparations are complete, when the moment feels right. This is not disorganization. It is a different philosophy of how time should serve human life, rather than human life serving time. A village gathering does not begin at 7 because the invitation said 7. It begins when the elder arrives, when the fire is lit, when the community has assembled, and the air has the quality of readiness. The beginning is a felt quality, not a number. And when the ending comes, it comes similarly, not because a clock says so, but because the event has completed itself, because the conversation has said what it needed to say, because the music has moved through its natural arc, because the night has reached a quality that invites rest. There is something in this that corresponds to the natural rhythms of attention and energy. The body has its own ultradian rhythms, cycles of roughly 90 to 120 minutes in which alertness rises and falls throughout the day and night. Every hour and a half or so, the body goes through a brief dip, a moment of lower alertness and slightly increased dreaminess, before returning to its working mode. These are the moments when you find yourself staring out the window for no apparent reason, or losing the thread of a task and needing to pick it up again. They are not failures of discipline. They are the body's natural punctuation, pauses built into the day's rhythm, brief spaces of quiet in the busy text of waking life. The body has always known that working without stopping is not the most efficient thing, but rather the most anxious thing. The body has always preferred the rhythm of engagement and rest, effort and recovery, the way a heart beats rather than just contracts. Right now, somewhere in the world, a new baby is being born. Born into a particular time zone, on a particular date, in a particular place, with a particular quality of light coming through the window, morning or afternoon or night, summer or winter, rain or sunshine. This moment, the first moment outside the womb, will not be remembered by the baby. No one remembers their own birth, but it is being recorded. In birth certificates, in family photographs, in the minds of the people in that room, in the cellular programming that begins immediately to calibrate the new body's clock to the particular rhythm of light and dark in this particular place. The baby is already beginning to synchronize. The body is already listening to the world it has arrived in, already taking its first lessons in the rhythm of this particular corner of the earth. And somewhere else in the world, someone is dying, peacefully, perhaps, in a bed that has become very familiar over many years, in a room that holds decades of morning light and evening shadow, attended by people who love them. The last breath. The release from the particular ongoing project of being a body in time. There is nothing frightening about this, observed from this distance, thought about with this degree of softness. It is simply the other end of the same arc that the baby is beginning. The full span of a life, from the first breath to the last, compressed into a single thought. And in between, all the mornings and evenings, all the noons and midnights, all the summer solstices and winter solstices, all the time zones crossed, and time changes observed, and dark hours waited through. A whole life is a very long time and also very brief, depending on where you stand to look at it. In the Amazon, again, the river moves at different speeds in different seasons. In the dry season, the river is lower, and the current is slower, and the water is clearer, and you can see the sandy bottom in the shallows and the fish moving through the deep channels. In the wet season, the river rises by 15 or 20 meters in places and floods enormous areas of the surrounding forest, and the fish swim between the trees, and the forest is half submerged, and the line between river and land becomes a broad, slow, flooded world of extraordinary strangeness and beauty. The river's clock is the rain, the rains that fall in the Andes and across the Amazon basin, swelling the tributaries and filling the river until it can no longer contain itself and overflows into the forest that has been waiting for it. The trees have adapted to this flooding over millions of years. The fish depend on it. The whole ecosystem is calibrated to the annual pulse of the river, which is itself calibrated to the annual pulse of the rain, which is itself calibrated to the position of the sun and the circulation of the atmosphere and the particular geography of a continent. Everything is connected. everything is timed. The seasons themselves are one of the most ancient time-keeping systems. Before clocks, before calendars, before written language, the seasons told people when to plant and when to harvest, when to follow the herds and when to shelter, when the salmon would run, and when the berries would ripen, and when the first frost would come. The seasonal round was the original calendar, and it was a calendar written not on paper, but on the world, in the behavior of animals and plants, in the temperature of the air and the water, in the height of the sun above the horizon, and the length of the shadows at noon. People read this calendar with their whole bodies, with skin and nose and ear and eye, with the accumulated knowledge of their communities and the inherited instincts of their biology, and they were remarkably good at it. The precision with which some indigenous peoples predict and respond to seasonal changes in their particular landscapes is a form of knowledge that took hundreds of generations to accumulate, and that is encoded in language and ceremony and practice in ways that are not always immediately legible to outsiders. The word solstice comes from the Latin sol, sun, and sistere, to stand still. At the solstice, the sun appears to pause in its annual journey north or south, reaching its furthest point and then beginning to retrace its path. For a few days around the solstice, the sunrise and sunset happen at nearly the same point on the horizon. The daylight hours change only by seconds rather than minutes, and the sun seems to hesitate, to hang at its extreme before turning. This is the still point of the year, and in many cultures, ancient and modern, the solstice is treated as precisely that, a moment of stillness, of pause before the great turning, a moment to mark, to celebrate, to acknowledge, a moment that says, the light has gone as far as it goes. Now it returns. The winter solstice, in particular, is one of the oldest human festivals. Long before Christmas, long before Hanukkah, long before any of the existing religious calendars were established, people in the Northern Hemisphere were gathering at the darkest time of the year to mark the turning of the light. Newgrange in Ireland. The great stone circle at Stonehenge in England, which aligns with the solstice sunrise. The elaborate ceremonies of ancient Rome, which continued through the season of Saturnalia in a great festival of feasting and reversal and relief. The Norse celebration of Yule, with its logs and candles and evergreen branches, carried inside to remind the household that green things still existed even in the dead of winter. All of these are expressions of the same deep human response to the darkest moment of the year. The need to acknowledge it, to mark it, to celebrate the turning that follows it, to feel in community and firelight that the darkness is known and is not frightening and will not last. And it never does last. The sun always comes back. Every winter has ended in the history of the earth and been followed by spring. This is not something that has changed in the time of human existence. The sun has turned and returned every year for billions of years, warming the hemisphere that was in shadow and withdrawing its warmth when the angle changed. This is perhaps the most reliable thing that exists, more reliable than any human institution, any government, any promise. The spring will come. The light will return. The days will lengthen again, slowly at first and then gathering pace until the summer solstice arrives and the wheel turns again, and the great slow pendulum of the year begins its other arc. You are somewhere in that arc right now. The seasons are doing what they do, and the earth is where it is in its orbit, and the days are the length they are, and none of this requires anything from you. the cycle is running. It has been running for a very long time without your help, and it will continue to do so. In medieval Europe, before mechanical clocks became common, time was primarily marked by the church bells that rang at regular intervals across the hours of the day. The canonical hours, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, divided the day into segments of prayer and work and rest, each announced by the bells of the nearest church or cathedral. In a village, the sound of the bells was the sound of time itself. Everyone within earshot knew, without looking at any device, what part of the day had arrived, what was expected of them, what the community was doing at this moment. The sound moved through the air from the tower to the fields and the kitchens and the workshops, carrying the shared time of the community with it, weaving everyone into the same rhythm. The sound of bells at a distance is one of the most peaceful sounds in the world. Not the urgent, alarming kind of sound that bells can make when they are rung in warning, but the steady, unhurried sound of bells marking the hour, the deep resonance of a large bell dying away into the still air, followed by the silence that comes after, which is a different quality of silence than the silence before the bell, charged with the memory of the sound. In small towns in France and Italy and Switzerland, this is still how many people know what time it is. Not from a phone or a watch, but from the bells, the deep, slow, unhurried bells that have been marking the hours from the same towers for centuries. There is a phenomenon in certain cathedrals and large stone churches where the reverberation of sound is so long, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, that a single note played on an organ continues to fill the space long after it has been struck. The stone absorbs and then releases the sound slowly, over many seconds, and in that release the air of the building is filled with a kind of harmonic memory of all the notes that have been played. Large cathedrals in the north of England have reverberation times that are among the longest of any man-made space, close to 10 seconds for certain frequencies. In that reverberation, you can hear the history of the building, the centuries of music that the stone has absorbed, the echo of every note ever played in that space resonating at its particular frequency long after the instrument has fallen silent. The stone remembers sound the way stone remembers everything, very slowly, very patiently, for a very long time. In Japan, there is a concept called mono no aware, often translated as the pathos of things, or an empathy toward things, which refers to the bittersweet awareness of impermanence, the gentle sadness that accompanies the appreciation of beautiful things that do not last. The classic expression of mono no aware is the cherry blossom, the sakura, which blooms with extraordinary beauty for only a week or two each spring, and then the petals fall and the trees are green and ordinary for the rest of the year. The beauty of the sakura is inseparable from its brevity. If it bloomed year-round, it would not move people in the same way. It is precisely because the blossoms appear for such a short time that their appearance is an event, that people travel to sit under the trees and eat lunch and drink tea in their company, that the forecast of peak bloom is watched for weeks in advance. The falling petals are not a sadness. They are the completion of the beauty. The blossoms fulfilling their nature by blooming fully and then releasing. There is something here for the thinking mind that is beginning to slow and soften. Nothing that is beautiful lasts forever, and this is not a problem to be solved, but a quality to be received. The day that has just passed was full of things, full of particular light at particular hours, particular sounds, particular textures of experience. None of it will happen again in exactly that form. The day is already in the past, already a part of memory, already being reorganized and compressed and softened by the processes of the sleeping brain, which is already, even as you lie here on the edge of sleep, beginning the quiet work of consolidation, of filing the day's experiences into the long memory, of clearing the short-term workspace for tomorrow. The brain does not sleep when you sleep. It works differently without your conscious direction in the language of dreams and chemistry and the slow reorganization of neural connections. But it works. The brain is tending to you while you rest. In Finland, there is a word, sisu, that describes a kind of stoic determination, a deep resilience, a capacity to continue through hardship without complaint. But there is also a concept equally embedded in Finnish culture that speaks to the opposite, the concept of the sauna. The Finnish sauna is not just a place to wash. It is a ritual of restoration, a practice of intentional heat and steam and quiet and time that has been central to Finnish life for thousands of years. There were saunas before there were permanent houses. Babies were born in saunas because they were warm and clean. The dead were prepared in saunas. The sick were brought to saunas to sweat out illness. The sauna was the most sacred and most practical of all domestic spaces. In the sauna, time is measured in waves of heat. You enter. The heat is immediate and enveloping. You sit and breathe and sweat and say very little. After a while, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whenever the body has had enough, you emerge into the cool air, which is shocking and then extraordinarily refreshing, and then you return. This cycle of heat and cool continues for an hour or two, until the body is completely relaxed, completely open, completely wrung out of tension. No one looks at a phone in a sauna. There is nothing to look at except the wooden walls, the steam rising from the stones, the light coming through a small window. Time in the sauna is completely severed from clock time. It is body time only, the time of sensation, of warmth, of the gradual dissolution of whatever the day built up in the muscles and the nerves. This dissolution is what is happening to you right now. Not in heat, but in the soft surrender of lying still in the dark. The muscles are releasing. The nerves are settling. The breath is slowing. The brain is beginning its transition from the quick, associative thinking of wakefulness into the slower, more abstract, more image-based thinking that precedes sleep. That hypnagogic state, the edge between awake and asleep, where ordinary thoughts begin to take on a slightly irrational quality, where images appear unbidden, where the distinction between thinking and dreaming begins to blur. If you are in that state now, or approaching it, simply let it continue. You don't need to check whether you are falling asleep. You can simply fall. In the rainforests of Borneo, there are rivers that run through caves. Underground rivers, completely dark, moving through chambers of limestone that took millions of years to form. In these caves, there is no light at all, not the darkness of a room with the curtains drawn, or the darkness of a cloudy night, but the absolute darkness of a place where no photon has ever entered without human help. In this darkness, the cave system has its own life, its own clocks, its own rhythms, entirely independent of the sun. Blind cave fish drift through the water, their eyes vestigial and useless, navigating by other senses. Cave crickets venture to the surface at night and return before dawn. Swiftlets nest in their millions on the cave walls, navigating in the dark by echolocation. their clicks and echoes filling the cave with a sound that maps the space in 3 dimensions without any light at all. In these underground spaces, the boundary between day and night does not exist. The cave operates on its own time, dictated not by the sun, but by its own internal rhythms, its own seasonal patterns of flooding and water level, its own temperature cycles driven by the outside world but felt only as slow, deep changes in the rock and water. There is something in this that is also true of sleep. When you sleep deeply, the connection to the external world is suspended. You do not know if it is midnight or 4 in the morning. You do not know if the wind is blowing or if it has stopped. You are in your own cave, your own depth, moving through your own internal rhythms without reference to the sun or the clock or the demands of the day. The world continues. It is there when you return. But while you are deep in sleep, you are in the underground river, moving quietly through the dark in your own time, at your own pace, in a space that belongs entirely to your inner life. The average human being will spend approximately 1/3 of their entire life asleep. If you live to be 80, approximately 27 years of that life will have been spent asleep. 27 years. This is not a loss. This is not time wasted or subtracted from the life. These 27 years are the years during which the brain processes and consolidates memory, during which the immune system regenerates and repairs, during which the body grows and heals, during which the emotional brain integrates the experiences of the previous day into the longer story of who you are. Sleep is not a pause in life. It is a third of life itself, and a third that contains some of its most essential processes. Some researchers believe that dreaming plays a role in emotional processing, that the night provides a space in which the raw material of the day's experiences is worked on and refined and integrated in ways that the waking mind, with its continuous demands and its practical orientation, cannot achieve. The particular quality of dream consciousness, its freedom from temporal logic, its willingness to combine things that don't belong together, its emotional intensity without practical consequence, may be precisely what is needed for this work. The dreaming brain is not confused. It is doing something that the waking brain cannot do in the same way. It is working on the feeling of things rather than the content of things, on the emotional texture of experience rather than its factual record. You may dream tonight, or you may pass through the night in the deep, dreamless sleep that feels in memory like nothing at all, like a cut in the film of the day, a jump from falling asleep to waking, with nothing in between. Both are forms of rest. Both are what the body needs. You don't need to choose or to prepare or to direct what happens in the night. The night will take care of itself, as it always has, as it will always do. Somewhere right now, someone is having a very ordinary dream about something that is not ordinary at all, about a room that extends farther than rooms extend, about a conversation with someone who died years ago, about a landscape that is simultaneously two places at once, about flying just above the ground with the particular bodily sensation that dreamers sometimes report. A kind of low, gliding, almost effortless movement through the air just above the surface of an ordinary place made strange by the quality of dreamlight. Dreams do not follow the rules of waking time. In a dream, years can pass in minutes, or minutes can feel eternal. A dream narrative can move from childhood to old age in a single scene change. The characters in dreams can be several people at once, or can transform mid-dream into someone else, without the dreamer finding this strange. Dream time is elastic, associative, unconstrained by the direction that waking time is obliged to move. This freedom from chronological time is one of the reasons that many cultures have treated dreams as communications from a different order of reality, from ancestors, from gods, from the future, from the parts of the self that only speak when the waking mind is quiet. In many indigenous traditions, dreams are a form of guidance. The Iroquois people of northeastern North America placed great importance on dream interpretation, and the sharing of dreams was a part of community life. Dreams were not private experiences to be kept and analyzed alone. They were communal messages to be brought to the group and worked with collectively, their meanings teased out through conversation and ceremony. This is very different from the modern, primarily Western approach of treating dreams as symptoms of individual psychology, as expressions of repressed desires or unresolved conflicts. Both approaches are taking the dream seriously. They are simply asking different questions of it. The ancient Egyptians kept dream books, collections of dream images and their interpretations, among the oldest written texts in the world. The Sumerians of Mesopotamia developed elaborate systems of dream interpretation. The prophetic dreams of the Hebrew Bible, Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows as 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, are among the oldest dream narratives in recorded literature. The Greco-Roman tradition built temples, incubation temples, where the sick would come to sleep and dream, seeking healing from the gods in the form of messages delivered in the night. The dream was a threshold, a place where the human and the divine could communicate, a crack in the ordinary order of things through which another reality was briefly visible. Tonight, the dream is simply rest. Whatever comes in the night is welcome. Whatever the sleeping mind needs to work through, it is free to work through. You are safe, and the night is long, and there is time. In the high Himalayas, in Ladakh, in northern India, the rhythm of the year is dominated by the extreme elevation and the extreme cold of winter. The passes that connect Ladakh to the rest of India close in October and reopen in May or June, depending on the snow. During the winter months, the region is largely cut off. Not absolutely in the modern era of small aircraft and high-altitude roads, but sufficiently that the sense of being in a separate world is still present in the culture and the consciousness of the people who have always lived there. The winter in Ladakh is a time of turning inward. The fields are dormant. The animals are in their stalls. The days are short and extraordinarily cold, and the community, thrown back on itself by the withdrawal of the outside world, fills the long evenings with ceremony and music and storytelling and the quiet domestic work of the winter, the weaving, the repair of tools, the preparation of food that was preserved in the harvest season. There is a quality to the deep winter of mountain places that people who have lived through it describe in similar terms, regardless of culture. A kind of enforced attentiveness to small things, a heightened appreciation for warmth and light and the company of other people, a sharpening of the senses that comes when the world has been stripped of its usual busyness and only the essential remains. The fire, the food, the faces of the people you know, the stories that fill the evening. These things become, in the deep winter, everything. And they are not small. They are the whole of life, condensed into the essentials that the cold and the dark reveal. This condensing quality, the way that stillness and constraint can reveal the essential, is something that has been noted by meditators and contemplatives across many traditions. The Desert Fathers of early Christianity, who retreated to the Egyptian desert in the 3rd and 4th centuries to live in extreme simplicity, described the quality of time in the desert as different from the time of the city and the market. The sameness of the days, the same heat, the same silence, the same small tasks, the same prayer, created a kind of temporal depth, a sense of time being very full rather than very fast. The contemplative traditions of India and East Asia similarly describe the experience of meditation practice as an encounter with a different quality of time. Not the rushing, goal-oriented time of the active life, but a slower, wider, more spacious time, a time that is not going anywhere because it has never left the present moment. The present moment. This is where everything always is. The past is memory. The future is imagination. The present moment is the only place where anything actually happens, where anything is actually felt, where life actually occurs. And the present moment is always here, always available, always already the case. You cannot miss the present moment. You can be distracted from it, pulled into memory or anticipation, but the moment itself is always exactly where you are. Right now, the present moment is the weight of the pillow, the coolness or warmth of the air, the slight rise and fall of your chest. The present moment is very simple. The present moment is very sufficient. In the Zen tradition, there is a teaching that before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The tasks of ordinary life are the same before and after the insight. What changes is the quality of attention, the relationship with time, the experience of the simple acts of living. To chop wood in the present moment, fully in the present moment, without the past or future crowding in, is said to be both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because it is just chopping wood. Extraordinary because there is only the present moment of chopping wood, which is complete in itself. The Zen masters were not recommending a special or elevated state of being, accessible only after decades of practice. They were pointing at something that is always available, always present, always the case. The simple reality of the present moment, which does not require anything from you except your presence. Your presence is here. You are here. Lying still in the dark, breathing slowly, listening, perhaps, to the distant quality of these words, or simply to the silence around them. You are completely and wholly present in this moment, in this night, in this particular pocket of time that belongs to no one else and will not come again. The world is doing what the world does. The clocks are moving. The time zones are cycling through their hours. Somewhere it is noon. Somewhere it is midnight. Somewhere the first birds are beginning. Somewhere the last workers are finishing their shifts and walking home through streets that are almost empty and beautiful in their emptiness. All of it is happening simultaneously, right now, on the same planet, under the same sun, or the same moon, or the same dark, depending on where you are. And here, in this room, in this particular corner of the world's night, you are slowing down. The thoughts that came so quickly this evening are coming more slowly now. There are gaps between them, small, widening gaps, spaces of no thought that are growing longer and more frequent. This is good. This is exactly right. This is the brain beginning its withdrawal from the active, managed business of waking consciousness and beginning the long, gentle slide into sleep. You don't need to do anything to make this happen. You just need to not resist it, to let the gaps widen, to let the thoughts drift and then not be followed, to let the images that appear, unbidden and slightly strange, arrive and pass without commentary. The moon, tonight, is wherever it is in its monthly cycle, new or full or somewhere in between, visible or hidden by clouds, perhaps setting already behind the hills, or perhaps still high in the sky. The moon has been making this circuit for 4.5 billion years. It was here when the earth was young and the oceans were just forming. It was here when the first life appeared in the shallow sea. It was here when the first fish pulled itself onto land. It was here when the dinosaurs were walking and when they were gone. It was here when the first human beings looked up at it from the African savanna and perhaps felt, as we still feel when we look at it, something like wonder, something like recognition, something like connection to a large and indifferent beauty that is also, somehow, very close. The moon is your companion tonight. It is not watching you. The moon does not watch, but it is there, above the roof, above the clouds if there are clouds, moving its measured way across the sky, pulling the tides, reflecting the sun's light back to the part of the earth that is in darkness, doing what it has always done. You are beneath it. You are part of the world it illuminates. And that is enough. That connection to the moon, to the night, to the turning of the earth, to all the people in all the time zones who are also lying in the dark right now, also breathing slowly, also preparing for the long rest that the night provides. That connection is quiet and vast and entirely sufficient. In Australia, the Aboriginal peoples of many different language groups have astronomical traditions that are among the oldest on Earth. Continuous oral traditions of sky knowledge that stretch back tens of thousands of years. The Yolngu people of Arnhem Land, among many others, have detailed knowledge of the stars, not just as navigation aids, but as calendars, as mythological landscapes, as indicators of the seasons and the availability of particular foods. When the Milky Way appears in a particular position in the sky, certain fish are running in the rivers. When the Pleiades appear on the horizon at dawn, the rains are coming. When a particular star rises in the east, it is time to begin the ceremony associated with that star. The sky is a seasonal calendar, an ecological map, and a religious text, all written in the same stars that anyone anywhere on earth can see on a clear night. This is one of the most beautiful things about the sky, that it is shared. Not divided into time zones, not subject to national boundaries, not belonging to any culture more than any other. The same stars that the Yolngu read as a calendar are the same stars that navigated the Polynesian canoes, the same stars that the shepherds of ancient Mesopotamia organized into constellations, the same stars that a child in any city today might stand on a rooftop to look at. The sky is the great commons of the human world, freely available, unownable, inexhaustible, equally present from every spot on the globe that has a clear view upward. Whatever time it is where you are, whatever time zone defines your waking hours, the stars above your roof are the same stars that have been above every human roof that has ever existed. There are only a few hours until morning now, for some of you. For others, the night has barely begun. For some, it is the middle of the night, the deepest point, the furthest from both the evening that ended and the morning that is coming, the most fully nocturnal hour, the hour that belongs only to sleep. This is the hour to be in, not looking toward morning, not glancing back at evening. Simply here, in the middle of the night, where the dark is complete and the quiet is complete, and the rest is complete. The oceans are moving. They are always moving, driven by wind and tide, and the deep thermohaline circulation that carries a cold, salty water down to the ocean floor in the polar regions and moves it slowly along the bottom of the sea, where it drifts for centuries before eventually warming and rising again somewhere near the equator. This circulation, sometimes called the ocean conveyor belt, moves water over hundreds and thousands of years, distributing heat and nutrients around the globe, influencing the climate of every coastline and many inland regions. The water that evaporated from the Pacific and fell as rain over the mountains of Peru, running down the rivers to the Amazon and out to the Atlantic. That water has been on this journey for years, perhaps centuries, before the particular drop that became a cloud that became rain that fell on a mountain stream that ran to a river that reached the sea. The water has been everywhere. The water remembers everywhere, in its own dissolved chemistry, its own trace minerals and temperatures, the record of all the places it has been. You are mostly water. The cells of your body are mostly water. The blood moving through your arteries and veins right now is mostly water. The water in your body has been on a journey too, through rain and river and reservoir and tap and glass and body, over and over, in an endless cycle of evaporation and condensation, precipitation and drainage, for as long as water has been on this planet, which is almost as long as the planet has existed. The water in you is 4 billion years old, and it has been through everything, and it is here now, in the dark, in your cells, doing the quiet and essential work of being alive. The night is doing its work too. The bacteria in the soil are active in the dark, decomposing, converting, cycling nutrients through the chemical processes that make future life possible. The earthworms are moving through the soil, their slow passage aerating and mixing, making the ground porous and rich. The fungi that thread their invisible networks through the soil, the mycorrhizal networks that connect the roots of trees and plants over vast underground distances, are active in the dark, exchanging nutrients and chemical signals without pause. The whole underground life of the world does not sleep. It moves in the dark, quietly, at its own pace, maintaining the biological infrastructure on which everything visible depends. The trees are breathing in the dark, not photosynthesizing, that requires sunlight, but respiring, taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide through the tiny pores in their bark, using the sugars stored from the day's photosynthesis to fuel the slow metabolic processes of the night. The trees are resting from the work of the day, in a sense, the energetically expensive work of pulling water up from the roots through the xylem vessels, the work of building new wood and new leaves. But they are not still. They are exhaling. They are carrying on the life of the tree in the dark, in the cool, at the pace that the night allows. The roots of large trees can extend horizontally for distances much greater than the height of the tree above ground. A mature oak or beech might have roots that reach 50 or 60 meters from the trunk. Fine root hairs exploring the soil for water and minerals in every direction. These roots are growing, very slowly, right now, in the dark, adding micrometers of new growth to their tips, extending the reach of the tree very gradually into new soil, new volumes of earth, new reservoirs of water and nutrients. A tree's whole life is lived in both directions simultaneously, upward into the air and light, downward into the dark and soil. The tree spans two worlds with complete equanimity, finding what it needs in both. you are also in two worlds right now: the waking world, from which you are departing, and the sleeping world, into which you are arriving. The threshold between them is where you are, and it is a soft place, a blurred place, a place of mixed perceptions and loosening thoughts. The thoughts are softer now. The words of this narration may be reaching you from a slight distance, as if through water or through a very long room. This is the right way for them to arrive. You don't need to hold on to them. You don't need to follow every sentence. You can let them wash over you and around you like water, carrying their gentle cargo of images and ideas without requiring you to store or process any of it. The words are simply here, accompanying you toward sleep, as company accompanies a friend who is walking home. The conversation winding down, the pace slowing, the words becoming fewer and quieter, until there is mostly silence, and then the door, and then rest. The world's clocks are set in ways that reflect the extraordinary diversity of human experience and human arrangement. In Samoa, the island nation in the Pacific, the government made the decision in 2011 to move the country to the other side of the international date line, changing the date in Samoa by jumping from Thursday, December 29th, 2011, directly to Saturday, December 31st, 2011, skipping Friday the 30th entirely. The reason was economic and social. Samoa's major trading partners, Australia and New Zealand, were on the opposite side of the date line, meaning that when it was Monday in Sydney or Auckland, it was still Sunday in Samoa. By moving across the date line, Samoa aligned its business week with that of its neighbors, making commerce and communication significantly easier. The decision to skip a Friday was made by a government, implemented with almost no ceremony, and accepted with remarkable equanimity by a population that simply woke up one morning in a day that had not existed for them the previous night. One day, Friday the 30th, simply did not happen in Samoa. It was there for everyone else, but for Samoans it was skipped. A quiet excision from the calendar, a small but complete rearrangement of the relationship between an island nation and the flow of time. The philosophers have thought about time for as long as there have been philosophers. In ancient Greece, there were two different words for time: chronos, the sequential time of the clock, the time that passes in an orderly line from past to future, and kairos, the opportune moment, the right time, the time that is qualitatively different from the time around it. Chronos ticks on regardless. Kairos arrives rarely and must be recognized when it comes. A skilled physician, the ancient Greeks thought, practiced the kairos of medicine, knew not just the standard treatment, but the right moment for the treatment, the particular combination of patient and condition and moment that made the intervention appropriate. A skilled orator waited for the kairos of the speech, the moment when the audience was ready, when the mood was right, when the words would land as they needed to land. Kairos was not something you could schedule. It was something you could only recognize and meet. The present moment. This one, right now, is a kind of kairos. Not because anything dramatic is happening, precisely because nothing dramatic is happening. It is the right moment for rest, the right moment for sleep. Everything in your biology and your circumstance and the quality of this particular hour is aligned toward rest, and this alignment is not something you engineered or planned. It simply arrived, as kairos arrives, organically in the fullness of conditions that have come together without effort. The present moment is asking for nothing except that you receive it. And receiving it means simply allowing sleep to continue arriving, as it is already doing, in the soft, involuntary slide of the body and mind toward the deep rest that waits below waking. In the Andean highlands of Bolivia and Peru, the ancient agricultural terraces, the Andenes, that were carved into the mountainsides by Incan farmers over hundreds of years, still hold the shape of a relationship with the land and the seasons that was developed over millennia. These terraces are not just functional. They are a form of time written in stone, the accumulated labor of generations who understood the mountain and the soil and the rains and the frosts, and who designed an agricultural system that could support a civilization at altitudes where most farming is impossible. Each terrace is a shelf of modified soil at a slightly different altitude, with slightly different microclimates, allowing crops to be grown across a range of conditions that no single field could provide. The design is extraordinarily sophisticated, and it has lasted. Many of the Andean terraces are still cultivated today, still serving the purpose they were built for, still following the rhythm of the Andean agricultural calendar. The planting in October and November, the growing through the wet season, the harvest in March and April, the drying and storage through the dry season, the preparation of the soil in the cold, bright days of the Andean winter. The cycle has been running in some form for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Not long in geological time, not long in the deep time of the stars, but long enough for a grandmother to teach her granddaughter what her grandmother taught her, and for that to happen again and again, generation by generation, the knowledge flowing like water through the terraces, finding the path that has been prepared for it. The transmission of knowledge across generations is one of the most remarkable things about human culture. The way that what is learned in one generation can be preserved and passed on across hundreds of years, surviving language changes and political upheavals and climate shifts and the ordinary attrition of forgetting. The terraces of the Andes are knowledge made solid, made permanent enough to outlast the individuals who created it, and to go on teaching even when the original teachers are long gone. Tonight, the quiet knowledge your body carries, the knowledge of how to sleep, the knowledge of how to rest, the deep biological inheritance of 3 billion years of circadian rhythm, is working without any direction from you. You don't need to teach your body how to sleep. It knows. It has always known. Every night of your life it has demonstrated this knowledge, and it will demonstrate it tonight, as it is already demonstrating it in the slowing of your breath, the heaviness of your limbs, the softening of your thoughts, the widening gaps between one idea and the next. The body knows. Let the body lead. The night outside is whatever the night outside is, warm or cold, clear or cloudy, full of stars or full of fog, windy or completely still. It is doing what nights do, running its own program, pursuing its own agenda, which has nothing to do with your sleep and does not require your attention. The night will be fine. The world will be fine. Everything that needs tending tonight is being tended by someone, or something that is awake and alert and capable of it. The night nurses and the bakers and the long-haul drivers and the security staff and the animals that live in the dark and the algorithms that keep the networks running and the slow processes of biology that do not sleep. The world is watched. You don't have to watch it. You can let it go for a few hours and trust that it will still be there when you return to it. The returning will happen. As it has happened every morning of your life, you will wake from sleep into the particular quality of morning in your particular place, and the world will have continued in your absence, and you will rejoin it, and the day will begin. But that is morning, And morning is not now. Now is night. Now is the silence between one day and the next. Now is the dark and the stillness and the slow dissolution of waking consciousness into the deep, restorative rest that the night provides. There is a kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something, a positive quality, a texture, a depth. The silence of deep night in a quiet place has this quality. It is not empty. It is full of the things that are happening silently. The breathing of the house, the movement of air, the subtle sounds of the world at rest. A creak in the structure of a building is the building adjusting to temperature change, the wood expanding or contracting, the building doing its slow, nightly work of responding to the cooling air. Rain on a roof, if there is rain, is the water completing its journey from ocean to cloud to sky to earth, arriving here on this surface, making this particular sound in this particular moment before continuing its way into the soil and eventually back to the sea. The sounds of the night, whatever they are not intrusions. They are the voice of the night, doing what the night does, and you are part of it, lying in the dark, breathing slowly, as much a part of the night as the rain or the cooling wood or the silence between sounds. The time zones are turning. As the earth rotates, the terminator, the line between day and night on the surface of the planet, moves westward at about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, carrying the dawn ahead of it and the dusk behind it, dividing the world at every moment into its lit and its dark halves. Right now, the terminator is somewhere. It has a specific latitude and longitude on every part of its arc. In the north, it passes through a different landscape than in the south. On one side of it, the morning is beginning. On the other side, the evening is ending. And at the exact line itself, that moving boundary between night and day, the sky is doing what it does at every sunset and every sunrise, performing the same ancient ceremony of color and transition that it has performed every day for 4.5 billion years. The terminator moves on, the colors change, and the new day advances, while the old night retreats, and the cycle continues as it has always continued and will always continue. You are in the part that is night. You are on the dark side of the line, in the quiet part, in the resting part, where the clock says what it says, and the body knows what it knows, and both agree that this is the time for sleep. The agreement is complete. The conditions are perfect. The night is long enough for all the rest you need, and the morning will come when it comes. And between now and then there is nothing except the slow, dark, restorative passage of the hours, and you moving through them in the way that only sleep can move, without effort, without direction, without any requirement at all. Let the breath slow. Let the thoughts soften. Let the images come and go without commentary. Let the body settle deeper into stillness, into warmth, into the particular comfort of this bed, this blanket, this pillow, this familiar weight of your own body at rest. The world is turning. The stars are moving overhead. The moon is somewhere in the sky. The tide is doing what the tide does. The rivers are running. The trees are breathing. The whole enormous, patient, ancient, continuous world is doing what it does, and you are part of it, and you are resting, and you are safe. There is nothing left to think about tonight. There is nothing left to figure out or plan or worry over. The day is done. The night is here. The sleep is coming. Or perhaps it has already come and is deepening even now, even as these words grow quieter and farther away. Let them fade. Let the words dissolve into the dark the way stars dissolve into the dawn. Not suddenly, not with any sharp ending, but slowly, one by one, losing their edge, becoming less distinct, blending into the brightening, or in this case, the deepening, until there is only the vast and gentle dark, and the breathing, and the warmth, and the rest. Sleep well. The world is turning, and will be here when you wake, and there's time for everything. And right now, there is time for this, for rest, for silence, for the long, quiet passage of the night, for the simple and ancient and deeply sufficient act of sleeping. The night holds you. It has always held you. It will hold you still.